I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Michael Lauer, Director, Division of Cardiovascular Sciences, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, National Institutes of Health, and Barbara Leonard, Vice President for Program, Maine Health Access Foundation. Mike and Barbara, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You both have many years of experience managing grants and contracts. We're so glad you're able to join us today for this discussion on program officers' post-award activities. So let's go ahead and get started. Mike, I'm going to start with you with the first question, which is, funding agreements are critical documents for defining funder expectations. What are the hallmarks of a well-defined funding agreement? To what extent will the type of funding mechanism used, whether it's a grant or contract, influence the nature and scope of a funding agreement?
So I think the key thing is that it's an agreement, and an agreement is a two-way dialogue. So it's a two-way dialogue of expectations. So from the point of view of the funder, what are we expecting from the investigators? We're expecting that they will do a certain project, there will be deliverables, there will be a timetable, money will be spent in a certain way, there will be certain reporting requirements, and this is a time to have a detailed discussion about that. And then from the point of view of the investigators, they expect that there will be obviously payments for the work that they're going to do, as well as oversight. And they have a right to understand what that oversight is going to be, what's expected of them, and what kind of interactions they should have with the funders. So a good funding agreement talks about all that. And not only that, a good funding agreement reflects a healthy conversation or a healthy dialogue between the funders and the investigators so that the project has the highest likelihood of success. I don't really think it makes that much difference whether it's a grant or a contract. Many years ago, we used to think a contract is a very strict deal. You say, I want A, and that's exactly what I'm going to get. Whereas a grant, in government, we refer to a grant as an assistance mechanism. So in a very technical way, a grant is a situation where we give somebody some money and say, we wish you all the best. But that's not what really happens. In fact, there is give and take in negotiation with grants as well. So if a grant is done well, it's really no different than a contract.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Any points that you would want to add, Barbara?
I think for a private foundation, it's very similar, but maybe a few subtle differences. We do think about our contracts often as work that's being done on our behalf or for specific tasks that kind of extend us rather than things that are being developed by organizations out in our state where we fund. And grants often are a little more developmental. They really are to fund activities that the grantee organizations are doing. And so the way we manage those is a little bit different. Contracts often have more specific deliverables or shorter time frame deliverables, whereas grants often have a longer arc, might be for a year before we would expect to see some things being achieved. And so we manage them just a little bit differently.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So for example, when we have typical kinds of contracts, they're very much exactly what you say, Barbara. Like we have a contract that we want IT services and we want it done in a very specific way. And that's a short-term agreement. On the other hand, when we are funding research, we're funding research for the benefit of the public. It's not, I mean, obviously it's for our benefit, but it's really for the benefit of the public. And so I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And from a payment standpoint, we tend to handle them differently. So a grant, often we will pay upfront for the full year of activities, whereas for a contract, we may not pay any upfront, or we may pay a small amount upfront and then pay amounts based on achievement of certain deliverables. So it's just a little bit different philosophically.
And that's something we actually can negotiate that. So for example, for clinical trials, where what we're really after is that patients are going to be screened and enrolled and that various interventions will happen, we can set up an arrangement whereby we will pay as the patients are enrolled, which means that if a trial is not moving well, then money won't be moving either. And that's something that we can talk about up front about how that will actually get done.
Could you talk a bit, Mike, and then Barbara, about how you make modifications to the work plan if that comes up?
Yeah, I guess perhaps a better way of saying it is when that comes up.
Right.
Exactly.
Because there's this phenomenon called optimism bias, which we all know and we've all suffered from, in which things are planned to go better than they actually do. Almost always something happens. Certainly, particularly when we're managing large grants, large trials, it is invariable that things will happen. Well, what's the most important thing? We need frequent communication between the investigators and the funders. It's not unusual for us to be involved in weekly or bi-weekly phone calls with the investigators so that we know what's going on. The idea being that if there are small problems, we want to keep them small and deal with them at an early point in time. I think the most important issue, and this is like anything else in life, is communication, really good communication, and we want to make it very clear to the investigators that our project officers are resources. They are very smart people. They're eager to help. They want the project to succeed. We're not there to get people into trouble. That is not our job. We are happy if they are happy, and their success is our success, and that's a very important message that we want to convey.
We're going to take a break because I leaked into question number 2. So, sorry.
That's okay.